Primus Tracks with Josh and Frankie.
What a couple of dumb shits. Our guest today works in visual effects and animation. You have seen his work in productions such as Minority Report, Deadpool, and Stranger Things, among others. But he's also the mad genius behind the video for the Primus track Candyman. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more with Webster Colcord. Webster, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I don't know about Frankie, but I'm a big fan of visual effects work and animation. It's just one of those things, especially when you're a little kid. It just grabs your eye. So the process behind that fascinates me because that's not a talent or a skill that I developed myself.
Oftentimes, it's a saying amongst visual effects artists, we work on the best parts of the worst movies. You know, we don't have control over, like, the decision to make people look like cats, but we still do our best. Right. I didn't work on that, though.
That was very sly. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So those decisions are made at a higher level, you know?
In a sense, you're carrying out someone else's vision.
Depending on what the project is and the relationship with the people in charge, you know, we're asked to give obviously some of our own, creative spin on things, but it just depends, you know, how much of your own artistic style you bring to it. But you want to, of course, achieve what the director's intention is. I think if it's unclear what the director's intention is, then you tend to put your own thing in there and or give them choices, you know.
Oh yeah, talking to some other folks in visual effects and sound effects, you always have to give. It sounds like you always give them more than one. Give them one to hate. Is that something that you do?
Yeah.
Too?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. It's usually the split the difference that wins, but usually you go way too extreme, and then you go more extreme, and then you do a boring one that you know that they're gonna hate, and you present the boring one first.
What happens if what happens if they like the boring one?
They do sometimes, and that's terrible. It's awful. Then you regret. Then you just have regret. You live with regret. That's why people can't watch the movies they work on, you know, because you just remember all the misery. You know, and likewise, like Terry Gilliam said in an interview once, it's really important that the crew has a good time working on his movies because you can't enjoy the movie. You just look at all the things you could have done better, or, you know, the mistakes you make. But
well, let's trace your path through this career. How did you get into the animation game in the first place? And actually, to even step back from that, was this something that really caught your fancy as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, I have the same story as a lot of visual effects people. You know, I started in a garage when I was, doing Super 8 and regular 8 movies when I was a little kid. Wanted to be a makeup effects guy at one time. Used to read Fangoria magazine, and then later got Cinemagic magazine, and that I was like my Bible, and Famous Monsters of Filmland, all those magazines, and made my own little Super 8 shorts, and then I had a few lucky breaks. I worked on a 16 millimeter feature that was being shot in my hometown, actually, for a guy who happened to be a neighbor who was a USC grad, and I learned a lot about slightly more professional techniques from him. And then when I was 18, I ended up with good timing getting into the Will Vinton studio when they were expanding after doing the California Raisins to do a series of television specials, holiday specials for CBS. And so the first thing I worked on there was the Emmy-winning Claymation Christmas. So that was a really good place to start, and they were incredibly popular at the time. So like whenever any, and people would just, knock on the door all the time of, famous people coming through Oregon would tend to stop at Will Vinton Studios because it was the only sort of movie game in the state at the time.
You mentioned these lucky breaks, but you had to have brought something to the table, especially to catch on at a studio, right? So what's that like? What does it take do you have a portfolio that you're taking in or showing some video?
Well, it's a lot of different things. So, usually it's a relationship. I had worked on a low-budget project for a guy, John Logue, who ended up as an art director and cinematographer at the Vinton Studio. And so he got me in the door, but of course I had to do an audition sculpture. And so I did something that turned out pretty nicely. And what's funny, too, is at the heyday of the sort of California Raisin fad, we would get sculptures delivered, every day to the studio door. And oftentimes people, I remember in particular, there was this awful, King Kong monkey sculpture. And the note on it was sculpted entirely with toothpicks. And I remember one of the directors there goes, "It looks like it, it's like, we would get awful, sculptures every day. Some good ones, but very few. But everybody had to, sort of audition to get in there.
Okay, so and this animation and claymation, I know that there are some key differences. Are you more on the claymation side?
I'm glad you asked about the semantics of the the differentiation between stop motion animation and claymation. And Will Vinton used to remind us that claymation itself was a registered trademark, but of course it became like Xerox. Everybody calls a copy at Xerox, or they used to. But, it's a trademark that became commonplace language. So nowadays, the Leica studio, which owns the trademark, they don't enforce it anymore. So everybody refers to stop motion animation as claymation. But really, clay animation or claymation is a subset of stop motion animation. And stop motion animation can also include like the Ray Harryhausen style puppet animation, right, or the Stupid Buddy Robot Chicken style of toy/puppet animation, or even cutout animation. That's also stop motion animation. And even pixelation, which is animation of people, is also stop motion animation.
Okay, so stop motion's a big
umbrella.
Not necessarily an umbrella. Yeah, I guess an umbrella term, but it contains all these multitudes of different ways. Yeah, a catch-all. That's a great term.
Big old pot.
Okay.
Pot of like a boiling pot. I don't know. So I started at the Vinton studio doing claymation and learning the studio style, which was very specific. And they were very popular, and people forget, but before computer animation, there was only, the only way to do dimensional caricatures was either with puppets, like what the Spitting Image studio in England was doing, with these highly caricatured, puppets, or like the Muppets. But the only other way really to do it was with clay. There was no CG animation. So the Vinton studio, as they progressed, and by the time I came in the door in 87, they had already been around, 10, 15 years, or thereabouts, I think. And starting from just Will and one partner, growing up to about 8 people when I came on board, and we expanded to like 30. And they were super popular. They had the Domino's Pizza Noid. They had the KFC Chicken. We eventually did the Tang Lips. We had, of course, the California Raisins, and then a bunch of short films, including a few Oscar-nominated ones. And of course, Will had won an Oscar with his first short film, Closed Mondays. But over the years, they developed this studio style that was sort of like Mad Magazine caricatures, like Mort Drucker, quasi-realistic, not fully cartoony like Warner Brothers animation, but dimensionally stylized and caricatured. Learning that studio style was a lot of the job. And I was at a very impressionable age. I was just 18 when I started. So that style has really stuck with me all these years. And that's what eventually, of course, I tried to, bring back when I was doing the work on the first Les Claypool project I worked on, which was the Beats Antique Beelzebub video. And so it was exactly the same kind of like aesthetic, trying to caricature less, in that Mad Magazine style is the whole trick right there.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I just watched that video today to refresh my memory about it. And I was curious about that idea of the caricature of him, because I was thinking, it's animation. He could have 13 arms and 19 eyeballs and whatnot. But you just described where you grounded sounds like, at least where you grounded your approach.
Yeah, and it was super tricky. Like, I started animating. I tend to like to work with somebody else's sculpture. Like, I work with a really fantastic sculptor for decades, Damon Bard, and I usually give him a sketch and he does the model. But I was in LA at the time; Damon wasn't around, and I did sort of an attempt at getting Les right, and you'll see it in the first shot of Les in the video, which comes about 2/3 into the video. It doesn't really look like him. And then as I'm animating, I was able to zero in on the right, sculpture, design of the sculpture, and the lighting plays into that as well. Yeah. So but of course, it was easy because he wears sunglasses a lot, so I put those goggles on him.
Well, that's got to help because, given how expressive.
That helps a lot.
If eyes being so expressive, if you can cover them, that could save you a lot of work. So if it sounds like if we watch that video closely, or if I do, because I didn't watch it too closely, his caricature becomes more refined.
Yeah, I think it's just 2 shots, but the first shot really doesn't look like him. The last shot really, by the end of the shot, it's exactly I nailed it.
Okay.
And that's what we used for all of the PR photos.
Kind of take a step back because we're getting into the weeds, which is fine because that's where we want to be. But what's the appeal to you to create these kind of animations?
Of course, I've done a lot of computer animation over the years. I made the transition into after working in the clay and stop motion world and doing some cell animation too. Hand drawn animation. I moved into doing CG around 97, working with DreamWorks. And that was a difficult transition. And of course, but I always have kept practical or always kept my desire and skills kind of going in the background, doing stop motion on my own projects, and sometimes for work as well. So over the years, I worked on a couple of, after transitioning into CG for DreamWorks, I went and worked on a Henry Selick film, Monkey Bone, which was a big bomb.
Yeah.
But people love it now,
I remember
you when
that
it
film.
came out. Yeah. But people say they love it now. But anyway, worked on that and a bunch of other projects in stop motion over the years. But primarily doing CG. But I just kept that alive, and I'd love to. It'd be great if a big project came along that I could do. To just go back to that and sail into the sunset just in clay, but no, I still have to do the CG stuff.
Yeah. In the documentaries I've seen, I don't want to use the word tedious, but the specific attention to detail and making sure it is the movement, for lack of a better term, is working the way you want it to move. My goodness, just the minute, work that it takes. I don't think I have that mindset or that personality to deal with it.
Well, it's true that computer animation, to get the basic idea of a shot done in computer animation is very quick. You can hack something together that isn't fully rendered, but you can do it very quickly and you can get it animated very quickly. The trade-off on the tedium side is when you're working for a client, and with CG animation, it's one of its big pluses is that it's infinitely changeable.
Right.
But so the tedium gets to be, when you're on, take 50, or much higher, you're on take 70, or you're looking. I remember I worked on a fairly, not great movie, Sin City 2, and we were looking through 32 takes of arrows flying through the air to try and find the one that the VFX soup thought was good at one point, thought was acceptable, and we never found it. But yeah, it's just, the tedium gets into just the amount of iterations you do in the CG world. Or, sometimes it's the fact that lately, especially, I mean, it's always been this way, but even in the practical world, but, there's sort of this mindset that change is good for its own sake. So you find, a lot of 11th hour notes on scenes that you've been working on for weeks or months.
Yeah.
Just huge changes, and everybody has to scramble to get it done by the deadline that's coming very close.
And that's why some episodes and movies don't make sense.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's so true. Oh my God. But but the appeal, in contrast, you are there is a lot of minutia that you have to deal with, and sometimes when you're set up on a set, it's like diffusing a bomb. You have all the lights around you. If you bump anything, it's all gonna get ruined. If one little thing goes wrong, especially shooting in film, you got to redo days and weeks of work. But at the same time, when you're on set doing stop motion, you're a performer. You have to shut out the rest of the world and just concentrate on that. You can't, really answer the phone. You don't want to be distracted. You want to be healthy, but whereas with, it's CG animation, you can drink at your desk and it's not going to fall over, your character. I mean, you can mess things up. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I don't recommend drinking and animating in CG. But
I was considering a career change just now.
It's been done. Yeah.
I can't remember. I know I heard this number for when you're shooting to video live action. It's so many minutes or hours to get 1 second of usable footage. But with stop motion, how long does it take to get 1 second of usable footage?
It really depends on what it is. So it's actually it can be a super efficient medium, and that's why like Stupid Buddy Studios, they do Robot Chicken, and I worked there on a couple projects. They have a very fast turnaround on shots, and they do something like 5 seconds a day, for one animator, 5 seconds a day, because sometimes they just have paper cutout mouths, and it's very simple, but the performances are great. Going fast in animation sometimes is actually better. And Ray Harryhausen is, depending on the complexity of his shots, he could get a lot done in a day. But of course, when it came to like the 8 skeletons in Jason and the Argonauts, I think he said like sometimes he would get like 15 frames a day.
Yeah.
And with the clay animation in particular, because the puppet is not something that bounces back once you touch it. When you move it, you have to resculpt. And when you're doing lip sync, you're resculpting for the most part. Sometimes you can pop in a face depending on how it's designed, but you may spend 30 seconds on a frame, and then you may be stuck for an hour sculpting the right expression on the next frame. So there's another layer of complexity in the time factor there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that goes back to that idea, like you said, he had Les wearing sunglasses in that first video, so that probably helped move things along.
And the second one.
That's right. Yes, in the second one too.
Candyman, I made sure to keep the sunglasses because it's a signature. It seems like a signature thing for him.
No, I think you captured it, and we should get into that. But I really think you captured his essence, I suppose, in pretty darn well in those videos.
I'm a huge fan of your work. The reason that I particularly love claymation is that it takes me back to a time in my childhood when I was deeply impressed by Ray Harryhausen, particularly the Cyclops scene in The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and of course the skeleton fight in Jason and the Argonauts. And then, as an adult, reading about the process for these movies, I was incredibly impressed by the fact that Ray animated the skeletons by themselves, and then the actors had to synchronize the fight to the models that he had done. And for me, that seems like an awful lot of work compared to just standing in front of a green screen. When I saw the Primus videos for the first time, like videos that included some animation, like Jerry Was a Race Car Driver or My Name is Mud, I immediately remembered those incredible movies with claymation. And I was wondering if those particular movies also made an impression on you and influenced you to get into that field.
Yeah. Well, first off, Frankie, thank you for your adoration of my work. And also, I share with you the adoration of Ray Harryhausen's Cyclops. That blew my mind, and still just a great image when he comes out of the cave. He's bright orange and Technicolor. Love that, And thirdly, you actually got it backwards with the actors pantomiming to the skeletons. So Ray rehearsed it and actually shot it with stuntmen doubling in for the skeletons, and then rehearsed again and had the stuntmen out of frame and the actors pantomimed it, and then he matched the skeletons to that.
I see.
Just inverse of what you said. I think you probably meant that, but so the question was, is that an influence? And yeah, unquestionably, absolutely, Ray Harryhausen all the way.
My other question for you, Webster, is that I remember that you mentioned on Instagram that you were doing some retouching for a piece that you were going to sell to a collector from one of your commercials. It reminded me that the last year I traveled to see the Claypool Lennon Delirium to Washington, and I stayed with a friend who is a huge collector of Marilyn Manson, and he actually had the original clay figure that they made of Marilyn Manson for Celebrity Deathmatch, and he kept it behind a glass box. The fact that you had to do some retouching on the figure and the way that my friend preserves his figure, it makes me wonder if you need to, if there has to be a lot of care behind these figures as collector pieces. Like, one of these pieces is in possession of a collector. Can you just keep it behind the box, or do you actually have to look after it some way so it doesn't deteriorate or get damaged?
Well, I'm jealous that you saw Lennon Claypool Delirium. That album that first album was so awesome, and the second one too. And the videos I've seen of their concerts, it's just mind-boggling. It looks fantastic. Yeah, and I used to correspond quite a bit with Eric Fogel, who's the creator of Celebrity Deathmatch and also The Head. for MTV. And I believe that and they're going to bring that back. They're going to bring back Celebrity Deathmatch, I believe. But the figures were foam rubber bodies and I believe clay heads. So the thing about clay is that, oftentimes we would have to make a new clay puppet per shot, especially if there was a lot of resculpting being done. They just, you're sculpting, they just get dirty and they don't last. So it's kind of a disposable temporary medium. So it's totally not ideal to preserve over the long term. And, if you put it in sunlight, the pigments fade and they attract dust. The one thing that does happen, though, is that the oils in the clay tend to evaporate and you're just left with sort of this chalky substance in the shape it was originally in. So if they're left alone and it doesn't get too hot over a long period of time, they hold up okay. So sunlight is the main destroyer of the pigments and heat, of course, of the sculpture. But other than that, if you keep it more or less dust-free, it should be okay. Now, the body of his Marilyn Manson from Celebrity Deathmatch is made of either urethane or foam rubber, and that will deteriorate by itself, unfortunately. That just it rots away over time.
Well, Les Claypool mentioned that he keeps the clay figures from the Primus album covers locked away in his closet. If there's ever a Primus exhibition, in the future, and these figures are going to be seen, do you think they will be in good condition if they've been kept away in a closet for over 30 years? Well,
see, this is where I have questions for you guys, because I am not the first animator to, work for Les Claypool or Primus. The guy who did the older music videos, the ones that are more well known, like Devil Went Down to Georgia and Southbound Pachyderm, is a guy I worked with on James the Giant Peach, Mike Johnson. He directed those and did most of the animation. And I came in pretty late in the game when they were doing Beelzebub with Beats Antique, and then after that, I'm told that the early, the clay sculptures for the album covers were done by Les himself. Is that correct?
They were done by a sculptor called Lance Montoya.
Okay. There seems to be a lot of speculation that they were done by Les himself, but is Lance, is he still around? I mean, he's an old buddy of Les's or something?
He's still around, but he seems really hard to get a hold of. We haven't been able to track him down, to talk to him. As far as I'm aware, I think, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Les did the sculpture for Suck on This.
He may have drawn it, and I think Lance sculpted it from Les's drawing. I'm sure that's how a lot of these came about for these first few albums where we see the clay sculptures on them, yeah. And I know that Les also airbrushed them. Okay.
Well, airbrush the physical models, or airbrush the photos?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the physical models.
Physical models, okay. So yeah, I mean, if they didn't get squashed, they didn't see sunlight, and they didn't collect a lot of dust, that's a lot of ifs. They'll be fine. My Les Claypool from the Candyman video and from Beelzebub video, I keep them in my shop on the shelf next to each other. They've not been damaged in any way that I can't repair within a couple of hours. But it's not a permanent medium in any way. And that's kind of the beauty of it, too. It's completely ephemeral.
Taking into consideration, Webster, that Les seems to be very interested in archiving all the art and things related to his music and his videos, I'm surprised that he didn't ask you to keep the models of the Candyman video. Did he hint at all at the possibility of keeping those?
This is going to disappoint you guys, but I've only talked to Les twice over the phone, and I've never met him in person.
Uh-huh.
He's not that far from where I am, and I know lots of people who've run into him at the Radio Shack in Sebastopol. I know one person whose father owns the Radio Shack in Sebastopol, so it's no wonder that he would run into Les. But because he doesn't make himself scarce up there, I think. Yeah, it's not like I've gone out of my way to hunt him down and ask him. But no, he's never. I was going to offer him the first caricature, but it just never. It's never come up. When the day comes, I'll make it all nice. the first Primus project I worked on was, actually just Les, sort of as a guest musician on the Beats Antique project. And the Beats Antique project was really amazing. It was the Thousand Faces tour. They partnered with a San Francisco-based projection mapping company, Obscura Digital, and they wanted to do this concert where every song had a unique visual style and was projection mapped during the concert. And so, of course, they got Les to sort of be a guest musician on this one Beelzebub track, and although he calls it Beelzebub, and so I titled it Beelzebub in the video. They wanted to do that in clay, and via the director of the entire, tour video, Ivan Landau, I was brought in to do the clay animation. And so, and I was in LA at the time, and I was able to get some space from a company called Shadow Machine, an animation studio in Hollywood that I was working at quite a bit at the time. I brought out all of these things that I had actually made at the Vinton studio years ago and never ended up in, using it in a project. And I just brought all this stuff together. It was really great. It was a great little period of, a couple months where I put that all together. A couple of years go by, and I guess, Les liked it enough, even though it wasn't exactly his project. It was Beats Antiques project, and it also the concert was amazing. When you go see this stuff live, it was just fantastic. And there's some videos of that on YouTube of fans, taking video of the live concert with the projection going on, with the song, with the music. So then it was like a year later or a couple of years later, Primus gets together again to do the Candyman, sort of concept album. I guess it's the Willy Wonka, soundtrack album that they did, right?
Right.
So they wanted to do a clay animation video for Candyman, and I was busy working on, I don't remember what, I think I was busy working on Ted 2 at the time, and I, as much as I wanted to do it, I just couldn't really commit, but I also couldn't say no. And Ivan Landau, who directed the Beats Antique, concert tour, sort of feature-length almost, video package. He was also directing the Candyman video. And so I said, well, we'll split it three ways. I'll do a third, and then my friend Edgar from Bogota, Colombia, who's a fantastic clay animator, he actually helped me on the first video. I'll bring him in to do a third, and I'll bring another guy in to do the other third. So it was going to be a three-way project, and it just kind of fell apart. And one of the guys just couldn't do it. He got sick. And then Edgar did a lot of work, and then I was able to deliver, my third, but it took forever to get done, and I think it really frustrated Les. And I think it's really ironic that is the one that I think is more popular out of the three projects I've worked on with Claypool, Beelzebub, Candyman, and the Lennon Claypool Delirium music video Bubbles Burst, for which I did a segment at the end. By far, Candyman is the most popular, but it was the most sort of fragmented project, and I wasn't able to contribute as much to that as I would have liked. But yeah, it's weird.
For all our listeners, you can find Edgar on Instagram with the handle Se lo explico con plastilina, and his work is absolutely fantastic, as Webster mentioned.
Yeah, and he did more of the Candyman stuff than I did, but I brought him in, and I brought him into the Beelzebub project as well, and he just helped me out with a few things, but he's fantastic. Great guy.
And Webster, I recall that you told me that you were inspired by H.P. Lovecraft for the creature in the Beelzebub video, right?
Yes, there's a backstory, yeah. So that I tend to like, when I'm creatively in charge of projects, I tend to like to have multiple sort of threads going, and it was hard for me starting on that project because I'm an atheist, and I don't really believe in the binary concept of Satan and God, but I could, in listening to the Les Claypool lyrics, I realized, well, this is more like skateboard art. It's like the version of the devil that you would see on like a T-shirt at a truck stop or something.
Yeah.
It's that kind of skate art. So I can take this and twisted it into that I can go in that direction. Like tattoo art or something, and I can also bring in this. I can make Beelzebub, I can make him into an H.P. Lovecraft, sort of creature. And the creature I chose was Nyarlathotep, which I can't remember the backstory with that one right now, but it's this giant space-dwelling, amorphous thing with tentacles. And so that's the direction I went. And I also I made a direct homage to the movie and the Lovecraft story From Beyond. And actually, what's funny, too, is one of the guys I worked with in L.A. was one of the Tony Dublin was one of the main effects guys, and actually introduced one of the guys, Stuart Gordon, got him together. It was because of their relationship that Reanimator got made. But anyway, so Tony I had worked with, and I made a direct homage to From Beyond, which he had worked on. The idea is, there's like this pink light and all these people, in the crowd morph, because of the beams, sending out from the orb.
Yes, and it's really cool. It's fun to watch. And then when it came to the Candyman video, and you said you didn't do a ton of work on that, but what was the creative freedom like there? Was there already a vision and a storyboard and that sort of thing? Or
when we were putting it together with Ivan and Edgar and the other guy, the late Scott Nordland, I sort of laid some groundwork. We had a few, sessions where we chatted out some ideas, and it was sort of a free-for-all. And really, that project, the best way to describe it is fragmented. So I brought in some ideas that I didn't fully realize that Edward was going to do, and he did them differently than I was going to do it. And my idea was that, well, Candyman is not a man. Candyman is a creature. And the candy he exudes, and so these like Oompa Loompas would be feeding him raw sugar. And he lives in a cave, and he's like this giant creature, not unlike Beelzebub, but or Nyarlathotep from the first video, but different though. He's this sort of creature. I saw this later. There's actually a creature like this in a Richard Williams animation, Raggedy Ann and Andy, where it's just this creature that's always eating. Sort of like that. This guy lives in a cave, and sort of actually it's a Harryhausen. It's a direct Harryhausen inspiration. The dragon in the cave in Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. I just love that image, and I wanted this creature to be like that, chained up, but able to destroy all the Oompa Loompas at once if it wanted to. But the way they keep it at bay is feeding it sugar, and it sort of shits out candy.
Yeah.
and so they harvest the candy that it sort of exudes. That was my concept, and also they're experimenting with candy. So the Oompa Loompas are these weird sort of laboratory, henchmen, and they're experimenting with these different candies. And so they in the part of the music video that I did, they're experimenting on this guy. They end up turning him into a chocolate bunny. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but there you go.
Oh yeah. So the part where the guy, he tries the candy and his head melts, essentially, that part?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, that's the part that sticks with me the most.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. It comes out of nowhere. And that was, the way that came about was so super bizarre. You wouldn't believe it if I told you. But the cave that I built, the candy cave, the idea was I was trying to take it in a different style, completely different than the Willy Wonka movie, where it's this organic cave. It's gross. The candy is melting on the walls. The different colored candy is running down in streaks. And the idea was that the openings in the cave would open to where the monster is, and they'd be dumping sugar into its mouth. It didn't really turn out that way because, it was split between these different artists. And somebody, and I think it was Ivan's idea originally to have this kid, like at the beginning, pick up this piece of candy and eat it. And that didn't make any sense to me, but it was his vision, and he was bringing that to us. And so that's what we did. And it's just sort of nonsensical in that way. It was handing off from one animator who was doing the little candy piece that gets dropped on the ground and the kid eats it, to going inside the kid's body, and then we're in the candy cave. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that was sort of the nature of the workflow, splitting it up between three different people with one guy overall, and just it being so fragmented.
Webster, you mentioned the candy cave, and for all our listeners, I'd like to point out that if you visit Webster's Vimeo account, you will see a ton of fascinating behind-the-scenes videos from Candyman and from his other work. I recall a video where you are showing how you're working on the candy cave, and it looks like so amazing the way that you're painting the walls and adding all these details. And then I think there's a video where you are showing how you animated the part where Les Claypool is playing his upright bass.
Oh, yeah.
He's sort of turning around. And that's when you realize that the figure is, in fact, just a torso. It was never a full body model. And, watching those videos, it's really incredible to see all the work that goes behind that 4-minute video.
Yeah, that's really interesting, too, because it was actually an old Benton rig and maybe partly an old Benton armature. And the scale of the Les Claypool for Candyman was different than the scale. It was a much smaller scale on Beelzebub. I tried to keep everything tiny on Beelzebub with a very shallow depth of field. And they wanted it to be like the late Bruce Bickford's work. And I've known Bruce for years. He's passed away a couple of years ago, but they wanted to be like his work. And Bruce had done a lot of work for Frank Zappa's music videos and films. But the problem is that when you watch Bruce Bickford's work, you're watching years go by on screen. Like he is so dedicated and it took so long for him to do a lot of that stuff he did for Zappa that there's just no way really to achieve that level of detail in a regular time frame for a music video. But Bruce works small, and so on Beelzebub, I made everything smaller. Now on Candyman, the Les Claypool figure is about a third taller and bigger, and actually older. I actually sculpted him to be more representative of his current age, and when that video was done. And so the animation of him turning around was actually done by an animator named Kim Blanchett. But Kim's a great animator, and he did that one shot, the one element of Les turning around and playing the bass. And the upright bass itself, that was probably the thing that took the longest to make. That was made by a friend of mine named Dave Waddle, and it's a wooden bass, and the strings were made of elastic, which was a trick I learned at Shadow Machine Studio.
Wow.
So that when you pluck the strings, they realistically stretch and go back into a straight line. It's
mind-blowing to learn how many people actually collaborated on this video.
I mean, it was crazy. That's the thing. It was fragmented. So much of it was, a lot of it was shot in Bogota, Colombia, and some of it was shot in San Francisco with Scott Nordland, the late Scott Nordland, and then it was my shop in my apartment studio in LA.
Was it your idea, Webster, to synchronize the cow with the sound that Les makes with the upright bass?
I was going to mention that earlier. Actually, that's the funny thing. It was exactly the opposite. When I first heard the track and I was thinking about it, when Ivan sent it to me, I was thinking, well, the cow's the obvious thing, and I hate to illustrate the song straight away. I don't think it's a good idea. I think you want to bring a different dimension to the visuals than are in the song. Not necessarily all the time. I was going to go everywhere but the cow. But then in our phone call with Les, immediately he says, I want a cow.
Oh, really?
It's a cow. It's a cow mooing. So I was like, oh, God, okay. Well, we have to do the cow. How am I going to make it more interesting than just a cow mooing? And my idea was that the head of the cow turns into a big, bass horn, like you'd see on a mountainside or something, but actually I didn't do the animation. That was done by Edgar.
Yeah, and you mentioned that was something that came from Les himself. There's got to be a cow.
Got to be a cow.
There's which
wah wah wah. So disappointing.
I think that's always going to be on my list of demands anywhere I go now. Van Halen wanted green M&Ms or something. I just want a cow.
I think he said it was a chocolate cow too.
I guess that would thematically fit too, because you're working off of somebody else's music to create these visuals, and we know that Les is a very visual person, and he's really into film and visually representing his music. When you guys were going back and forth about what to include, that he really wanted in there?
I think he was okay with most of our ideas. He just wanted the cow. That was the only thing he changed from, because we came into that meeting, with the pitch that Ivan gave to Les and some sort of, style boards, a few illustrations, and we had already talked about what we wanted to do, and he was fine with it all. He just said, I just need that chocolate cow. I just want that chocolate cow to be in there. mooing with the sound. So I think he was fine with the other ideas, and I think, and he wasn't even that specific about where he appears in the song, like his own caricature. I think he didn't care. I think he didn't care if he was in it or not at all. His image. Yeah. So it was also my idea to have the chorus be those weird little heads, those candy heads. Uh-huh. In the scenes that I did, in the candy cave, there's these sort of these puddles of. The idea is they're delivering all the sugar, to go into the cave with the actual Candyman monster. And so there's these bags of sugar, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but the sugar is flowing out of the bags, and it's different colored sugar, like you'd see in like you'd use in a spun sugar, cotton candy machine, right? It's pink sugar, it's blue sugar, it's white sugar. And so all that sugar is spilling out and spreading out onto the floor, and then out of those piles of sugar come these weird heads do those lines like, who can take a sunrise, sprinkle with dew.
Sprinkle with dew, separate the chocolate and collect up all the dew.
Separate the chocolate and collect up all the dew. That part was done by, or maybe by Les, but in a sort of as a different character.
Yeah.
It was my idea to have, this duo of these weird sugar heads creatures do that, and that was what I animated, And then, of course, they sing their final line and they go back into a pile of sugar at Les. Les, he was more or less fine with whatever we wanted to do other than the candy, other than the chocolate cow. And it just took forever to get that music video done. I know he wasn't happy about how long it was taking.
My original question was going to be why the music video came so long after the release of the album, because it actually came out a year or more after the album. But
yeah, it was just crazy. Like we started it, and Les and Ivan, and then the record label had the contract in place, and Ivan was working on other stuff, and I was working on Cosmos and on TED 2 and all this other stuff, and I couldn't devote full time to it, and Ivan couldn't devote full time to it, and it just took forever to get to. I did what I thought was my third of the video, and then I couldn't do any more, and then we got to finish this thing, and I'm like, well, what can I do? I delivered my. Well, here's something more I can give you, and that's where the guy eating the candy came from, turning into the chocolate bunny. That was actually a thing I'd shot for a different project, but then folded it into that music video through, just some additional stuff I shot. It's just crazy how long it took because we were all over the place and doing other things, And I know Les was really frustrated.
In theory, it should have come out before it actually did.
In theory, I mean, he wanted it to come out when the album was dropped, right? I mean, usually, unfortunately, it's sort of a constant with bands. They don't call soon enough. It takes at least 8 weeks to shoot a music video, and there was plenty of time if it was a typical production. If we had been dedicated and the budget was there to just only work on that, and we had been given advance notice to schedule it in, it could have been done within 8 weeks, but it was sort of late notice. There was enough time to get it done, but we were already committed to other things. But we said yes, and I did my part, and then it just languished. That was when we did much later, when for Lennon Claypool Delirium, when I did that little segment, that was Les's main concern, which is, I just wanted to get done in a timely manner. And I knew that was because, of the Candyman experience, which wasn't really anything. It was kind of out of my control. It was frustrating for me to know that this guy was waiting for this thing, but I had moved on to other projects by that,
So we can talk a bit about the Bubbles Burst video, if that's okay with Josh.
Oh, I'm not going to object. What?
When I saw the Bubbles Burst video for the first time, before it was released, Cheney, the wife of Les Claypool, she actually shared some behind-the-scenes photos of the making of the video, and I knew that it was going to be like a live-action video. And when it finally came out, the first time that I saw it, I wasn't 100% impressed with the acting portion. Mm-hmm. But then when the animated sequence kicked in, when the claymation started, I was blown away, and I said, okay, so this part is actually amazing. And your contribution to the video saved the video itself, because I don't think it would have been absolutely memorable without the claymation part. I guess that, looking at the green screen photos that you shared, and also the the animated sequence that you shared on Vimeo, I guess that the process was fairly similar to Candyman, right?
No, the process was more like Beelzebub, because it was just for Bubbles Burst, it was just me and my team. I wanted it to be done in a timely manner for less, and they were contracting directly with me, plenty of advance notice. And so it was just like a regular production where it was like, do the designs, do the storyboard, do the animatic. And I believe the animatic, I think it's on Vimeo. Do the animatic, get approved, and, show it to Les, and then just go. Just get it done. Yeah, I mean, and you said, thank you for saying that the claymation sequence saved the video. I don't think it really saved the video because, it got a lot of hate. And actually,
I was actually going to ask you about that. Were you, when you made that video, were you at all expecting the backlash that would come afterwards?
Well, it kind of was because, I am a huge Michael Jackson fan. I can't really reconcile the current information about Michael with, my long-time fanship of him. And my first feature that I worked on was actually Michael Jackson's Moonwalker at the Vinton Studio. We did a segment of that. And so for me, the project meant a lot more than just it was a big thing for me, because I remember, going to a premiere of Moonwalker that we had in Portland after we worked on it, and Sean Lennon is in Moonwalker as a child, and so I knew the whole backstory. So the claymation segment of Bubbles Burst has homages from the Moonwalker work that we did. It was like a full circle thing, and sadly, I always thought I was going to get to work with Michael Jackson again later in life, but what happened? So I was, and Sean Lennon even said in the interview with NPR that he did when the album dropped, that they didn't mean anything, against Michael. It wasn't any kind of commentary on the whole controversy. It was just this, this statement about the time, about the experience of being around the chimp. But unfortunately, like you said, like the live action in the music video comes across, it gives you the kind of a really negative impression. So I kind of expected, once I saw the live action, I kind of expected, I don't think it's going to be, I don't think people are going to like that so much, But I'm proud of the piece we did, and there's all these like sort of little bits and pieces from that are references to the work we had done years ago for Michael.
If you listen to the lyrics of the song, there's nothing negative there. They just portray a specific time frame that Sean Lennon experienced with Michael Jackson. And the claymation portion of the video, I think it's absolutely fantastic because it also portrays the way that Michael Jackson was always harassed by the press. The way that he escapes with the chimp and turns into a spaceship. It's a wonderful metaphor for how he wanted to get away from all of that negative press and harassment.
And of course, the spaceship is the spaceship from Moonwalker. Yeah, and before he turns into the spaceship, he turns into the robot that he turned into in Moonwalker. And we didn't avoid the Speed Demon segment that I worked on at the Vinton Studio for Moonwalker. There was this recurring thing that Michael wanted with all the paparazzi in different forms. And so I fit those guys in the scene where, they come down in the bathtub and his mansion Neverland is surrounded by paparazzi. And I also fit in Tom Sneddon, the DA who harassed Michael. Right. Not that it was wrong. I mean, it hurts me too much to go and watch the new documentary. I can't reconcile my adoration of Michael when he was alive with that stuff. But all of that's in there. And plus, like, I don't know if I'm really proud of the detail when they go through the window, like Michael is like psychically communicating with Bubbles that, like, I've got this whole thing set up for you. Like, and you see that there's Michael's chair and there's the little Bubbles chair and it's loaded with bananas and candy and stuff, So yeah, we wanted to make something. It was an expression of love.
Yeah. Did you have to? I think I noticed that there was a sign or something that said Foreverland. Is that right?
Yeah, that was.
Did you have to name it that to get around the Neverland some kind of trademark?
Well, that was probably the second time I've talked to Les Claypool. I was going over the animatic I had done with him, and I said, now do you have lawyers? Like, do we need to worry about Neverland? And he said, no, just change it to I think it was Foreverland. Yeah. So it was his idea to just change it, which makes perfect
that'll
sense.
Avoid any headaches for sure.
Now, of course, there's not a giant shiny glove pointing at it, and we took a lot of liberties with the the theme park exhibits. The giant fruit and I'm forgetting now. It was a while back.
How long did it take you, Webster, to make the sequence and consider it done?
I think it was about 2 months. Yeah, it was it's a short sequence, and it was just an intense production. We just did it. Myself and mostly Damon Bard just did everything with a few other people involved. But Damon is, a sculptor I've worked with for decades now, and I'm really proud of the caricature we did of because of course Michael Jackson is played by the Mighty Boosh, well known for other things since then.
Right.
But what's the name of the comedian?
Fielding?
Yeah,
Noah Fielding. Yeah. And his brother plays Bubbles in the video. Noah Fielding's brother plays Bubbles in the music video. So, and that was something when Les told us that I was really surprised and amused. He had this guy in mind to play Michael. I don't know if we'd seen the live action by the time we had to design the character, but we had to do this character that was Michael Jackson and Noah Fielding meshed together, which is really a challenge. And I thought we pulled it off really well. I was really proud of Damon realizing this, design that I had done based on the live action,
Not really a question, just a statement based on what Webster shared with us. We're talking about the last 30 seconds of the video, and 2 months of work went behind those 30 seconds. It really goes to show that this is an absolute art form. It's an incredible craft. That's why I have such a deep admiration for your work, Webster.
Well, thank you. Oh, and I should mention too that one of the other things I remember from that phone meeting with Les there was an initial meeting where Les went over sort of the spitball ideas and what he wanted. And one of the things he had already shot the live action at that time. And one of the things he said was, we're going to put the characters in a bathtub to save you work. And that was really nice of him. See, instead of having because I guess he must have remembered working on Southbound Pachyderm and Mike Johnson telling him maybe he's remembering it takes a lot of work to animate a character walking. Maybe he remembered that all the schedule on that was taken up by the character walking. I don't know. He said, but we're going to put him in a bathtub. So, I had known that they were going to be flying over a landscape, but I didn't know that they were, then later so I imagined the Michael Jackson, Noah Fielding character with Bubbles, their costumes flapping in the wind and all that stuff. But then they shot the live action later, and he said, we put him in a bathtub to save you work. So that was kind of nice, and so then I was able to find a miniature porcelain bathtub, a real porcelain bathtub that was tiny, the right size. And I found that first, and I think I scaled the characters to fit that.
Oh, neat. So that's not clay. You found that piece.
We didn't quite have to build it. We had to just drill through it and mount it. But it's a real porcelain bathtub, and so it looked right. Looked good. And then, one of the things I loved about the track so much is that it, and I hope the audiophiles aren't offended by this. I don't think they will be, but I heard a lot of Pink Floyd influence in there. It reminded me of Floyd, right? The twangy
a little bit in there.
Guitar and the psychedelic nature of it, as we come down, and I just love that so much. So I, wanted to make the skies, feel psychedelic in that moment. Yeah. And then also I tried to make the transition. I tried to make a bubble that matched the bubble that Noah Fielding was blowing in the live action. And I put a lot of work into actually the first bubbles. They're actually, I don't know, I can't remember if they were used in the official music video. In my version, on my Vimeo page, you'll see a version of that sequence. It's cut a little bit differently in the official music video. And in the version that I put up on my Vimeo, I used this bubble element at the beginning. It's nothing really, but it was important to me for some reason.
You just mentioned something. You felt like a bit of Pink Floyd in there, and they actually ended up covering Pink Floyd a lot on those tours. The Clayton and Delirium did. My question around that is, music pushes the bounds of our imaginations. So what music inspires you or helps you get the job done when you're working? Of course, with the Candyman video, you've got the Candyman track, so that makes sense. But if you're working on something, what helps push your imagination?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First off, thank you for making me not feel so bad about the Pink Floyd reference, by saying they they played it in the Lennon Claypool Delirium concerts. Because I don't consider myself an audiophile, compared to real audiophiles. And then, of course, when you're working on a music video, you listen to the song first, obviously, and you hope you're inspired. Sometimes you're not. As you're working on it, you don't want to listen to it too much because then you over-memorize it and you lose that spark of inspiration. It's all about giving something a listen the first few times, like Alex in Clockwork Orange. If you see images in your head when he listens to Beethoven, you remember that?
Oh, sure, yeah.
So it should be like that. If it's music that inspires you, pictures should come in your head. And if you've been guided, by the artist, like Les Claypool, giving you an idea of where he wants to go with it, then you steer your dreams that direction. The trick after that is to remember what you first saw in your head and not over-memorize the song to the point where you lose that inspirational spark. But then also, of course, if there's new idea, like any of these things, like, my friend Tim Hiddle put it well, you have an idea in your head, you push to get it done, you push the universe, and the universe pushes back, and you get something in between. And so at some point, while you're doing it, new things emerge. And actually, Candyman, the music video, is all things emerging from the universe pushing back, with Bubbles Burst. Yeah, it was all about remembering that sort of feeling you get, almost of moving through space when you listen to that, that beautiful, I guess it's a guitar riff as you come down, and just, just that feeling of motion, you try to envision that in the work you're finally doing. You don't want to listen to the track alone while you're working all the time. So I love to veg out on Pink Floyd. Yeah. And back when I was animating at the Vinton studio, I used to I remember Roger Waters' Radio Chaos album was one of the big things I listened to. And also Led Zeppelin back at some point in my stop motion career. Basically, when you're animating, some animators, of course, Richard Williams was famous for saying, don't listen to music while you're animating. Yeah, I think it depends on the person. He set that as a hard and fast rule, but, I work with Phil Tippett quite a lot these days, and he listens to music while he's working all the time. So I think it depends. The idea is that it helps you, in some ways, stop the chatter in your head. Computer animation is weird. You can sometimes listen to music, sometimes you've got to concentrate too much on the numbers. Sometimes I know a lot of people who watch videos or listen to a video, a talk show in the background while they're computer animating, because a lot of it is just like bookkeeping, making sure your assets are in the right place and all this. Anyway, but with stop motion animation, it's a performance and it's meditative in some ways, and you want to stop the chatter, getting in the way of bringing out a performance. So you tend to listen to some music that is good and is all the same. You don't want a song that's really bad popping up in the middle of your work that you have to reach onto your, back in the old days it'd be a Walkman and you have to fast forward. So what you want to do is you want to make a these days it's easier. You make a playlist of your favorite songs, but they all kind of have to be the same. And what I found in the old days was the best albums to use were like compilation of like Led Zeppelin, for instance, of all their best stuff, because you don't get that horrible song that shouldn't be there, or you could never, you can't listen to the White Album while you're animating because it's too different. It's all brilliant, but there's too many different things. You're gonna Number 9, right? That's on the White Album, right? It's this sort of, famously it was a pile of tape that was just spliced together, experimental, noise music sort of. You're listening to a song and then you go to that, you lose your concentration. So you got to have consistent, good music, and when that's working for you, the only way you know that time passes is by how many times you hear the same song again because it's on a loop.
Yeah.
So,
Webster, did you watch the Satori music video from Claypool and Delirium? It's also completely animated, and it was done by Japanese animators.
Yeah, I did watch it. Yeah, and it falls in line with, there have been a number of attempts over the years at doing clay animation, the style of clay animation with computer models, and usually with a sort of a texture mapping that has, gives the impression of fingerprints. They put a lot of work into it, and it does all the things that computer animation can do, like multiple characters, things that are easier to do when you're not working in the physical world. It's quite successful in some ways in achieving its claymation look, but it's not claymation. But I did see it, yeah. I mean, now what do you think of it?
It's a really great video. I think it fits the song perfectly. A music video really transcends when you immediately associate the corresponding song with it every time that you hear the song. For example, that's something that happens with Jerry Was a Race Car Driver.
Right.
You listen to the heavy parts of the song, and you immediately think about the characters in the Sea of Cheese from the music video. And I think that's something that also happens with Candyman and with the animated portion of Bubbles Burst. They are so compelling. For me personally, whenever I listen to those songs, I play the video in my mind.
Well, that's a huge compliment for the the Bubbles Burst sequence, and that was my intention. With Candyman, I don't know what's going on there because I don't get it. I don't get why people like it so much. Because to me, it's just one of these things where I can't really enjoy watching it because I think of all the things I would have done if I could have just dedicated all of my time to that. There's a saying that actually I heard from Phil Tippett via George Lucas that I heard via Phil Tippett. He said that George used to say, everybody's making their own movie. Everybody on the crew makes their own movie, so everybody contributes something and they all have different ideas. And likewise, the audience, when they see something, it's a different perception than the person or persons who made it, So I don't get the Candyman thing, but whatever. But I totally agree that, a really successful music video makes you perceive the song differently. And I think that's always been the case with Les's music videos. And that's why maybe he, and I've known a number of people, when I would tell friends of mine, I'm working on a Les Claypool thing. It's like, oh, I work for that guy I made him up on set as in those rubber costumes. What video was that where they did the heartbeat
Beaver
thing?
song,
Yeah, known as Big Brown Beaver. Yeah. I have a friend who worked on that, and I've had other friends who worked for him over the years, and maybe that's why he's put a lot of work into his music videos over the years because he's doing a character, and so it's important to realize sort of a visual version of that character. I don't know, but I remember back in the 90s when, Primus was new and seeing My Name is Mud, on a music. I used to work on a Portland, Oregon music video show back in the 90s called Bohemia After Dark. Primus was new and I saw My Name is Mud. And then, of course, completely changes the way you listen to the song. You can't, you can't listen to the song ever again and not see his face with this spitting,
that big wad of chaw just going down his lip and his mouth.
Or, like, I remember thinking way back in the old days, I'm not into these Primus guys, like John the Fisherman, what's that about? And then I saw the music video, and I really liked that song after seeing the music video.
Oh, interesting.
Like exactly what you said, Frankie, is, a good music video can just change your perception of a song.
I really hope, Webster, that we get to see more of your contributions to future Les Claypool videos.
Well, thank you. Have you guys been in touch with Les or his people?
No, I doubt that'll happen.
No. I was gonna go to a friend of mine actually invited me to Primus playing with who was it? I can't remember. I think it's sort of a Primus spin-off band.
Oysterhead?
Oysterhead, that's right. I was gonna see Primus with Oysterhead with a friend, and I was gonna call up the guy. There's a guy who is, he just works for the band, a guy named Ogden, and he was my main contact. Yeah, do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, they call him Agent Ogden.
Because he's credited for the design of the albums, and he also records his stuff while they are on tour.
Yep. Yeah. We've seen his name in print here and there on Primus stuff.
So he's a real person, and the reason I think I can say this, I mean, maybe it'll get him to contact me, but I think the reason they call him Agent Ogden, is because he used to be an undercover agent, like in the Southern Cop Show with Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, True Detective.
True Detective, yeah. He used to be like a guy he used to be like Matthew McConaughey in True Detective. He used to be an undercover drug agent.
Oh, wow. I did not
For real.
know that.
And now he works in rock. He's like a roadie, essentially,
Yeah.
So they call him, but they refer to him by, as the Agent O. And he's just like you would expect from a guy who was an undercover narc, I guess. You would expect he's just an totally ordinary looking dude.
Uh-huh.
The kind of guy you would just walk by and never suspect a thing. That's exactly who you want, an ordinary looking Joe. So that's Agent O, and I was going to contact him when I was going to go to the Oysterhead and Primus concert and finally get a face-to-face with Les and see if they, just for fun, But yeah, that was a couple months ago, so obviously all the concerts have been, shut down. But I still, at time to time, send a message to Agent O, and there hasn't been any stirrings about more music video stuff, but, maybe one of these days.
Yeah, I really hope that they go your way.
I need to get up there to Sebastopol and try the, he got into the beer business? I knew he does the wine thing.
Business. Yeah.
Oh, no, he was doing a mellow soda. That's it.
Right.
He was doing a soda.
Yeah, the C-pop, yeah.
So, I am a foodie and I love, it's beautiful up there in Sebastopol. So I got to get up there and just visit his whole thing, one of these days.
That'd be a good trip. Take Frankie with you because he really wants to go too.
Where is Frankie?
I am in Mexico City.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Well, and what's funny is that Edgar from Bogota, Colombia. So I met Edgar he was in LA at the time I was doing Beelzebub. And I knew him online, but I didn't really know he was in LA at the time. And eventually, and luckily the timing of his LA, he lived there for a while. The timing of that worked out with the music video, and he helped me build a few props and things. And then I went to Bogota back in 2015 to do a presentation, and so we got to hang out down there, and that was awesome. And then in the time since then, Primus played in Colombia, and Edgar got to meet the band backstage. Edgar's
that's so cool.
The whole band, and they talked about the music video, but I still haven't met them in person.
You're in the same state,
and I'm here.
Yeah, you're in the area.
I'm a neighbor. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what. Thank you so much for talking to us, Webster. You really actually, talking to you, I learned a lot about just the industry itself and how it works, but also it was really nice of you to shed light on those specific videos that Les and Primus were involved with.
Thanks, man. And maybe someday we can there'll be a panel at a Primus convention where we can all talk about Candyman and try to analyze why it's so popular.
Oh, I look forward to that day.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Webster. It was absolutely fascinating speaking with you.